just outside of Toronto, about 90 minutes west of Toronto. I presented on multiculturalism and the Black church in Canada. And I actually wanted to point to the plurality of both multiculturalism and Black church, Black Christian experiences. So my presentation was entitled, "Will the Real Black People Please Stand Up? Multiculturalisms and Black Christianities in Canada." And my emphasis was on the idea that in a Canadian context, often the United States is used as a reference point in terms of Black experiences historically, and especially in terms of issues of Black identity. And reference point by whom? Popular cultural images, and sometimes as well in terms of academic reference points. So I wanted to point out that in a North American context, that Canada too has its own history of enslavement, history of colonialism, and history of racism, as well as struggles against all of the three. There's been a lot of cross-border contact between Canada and the U.S., but there are also some particularities about Canada. The fact that it remained a British colony after the United States became an independent republic. The fact that it's a Commonwealth country today. The fact also in terms of Black experiences, the kind of migration that happened in the late 1960s through the 70s and up until today as a result of the point system in terms of immigration. And so there's some different demographics in cities like Toronto and Montreal, which have been the main receiving points really in Canada in terms of recent, that is, from the 1960s immigration. So that was one of the main points.
You talked a little bit about immigration, also dealing with coming in as labor as well. Can you speak to that as well?
Well, the main point I was making there is that if we look at migration patterns in Canada, they're often tied to the labor market and demands for labor. And we can see historically enslavement. So enslavement of Africans for over 200 years, ending around 1834, as with the rest of the British Empire. You also have experiences of indentureship as well. And you have subsequent to that different groups of people from different areas of the world being brought in for specific kinds of labor requirements. So Chinese men. So it's racialized, but it's also gendered as well too. Chinese men working in mining on the West Coast, building the Canadian National Railway. Black women as domestic workers, various work schemes through the 20th century, for instance. And so I think it's necessary when we're talking about immigration in Canada to have a sense of how the labor market is tied in with that.
It seems like the theme of mass incarceration throughout the diaspora is a common theme of the conference we see here in the UK. I guess about 1% or so of the population, but yet a high level of incarceration of Blacks. I believe you mentioned 3% of the population in Canada.
About 2.5% of the population is Black. In the province of Ontario, there's an overrepresentation in terms of young Black men being incarcerated. And it's very evident. So what's going on there? And this is noticeable over the last decade or so. So early 20th century, something is happening. I'm interested in the conversation in terms of what does it mean for those individuals, their families, and their communities? What does it mean in terms of issues of policing? Is it racial profiling? What does it mean in terms of the long-term outcomes for these young men and for their communities? And what's going on in terms of transnational connections or links? So it's not an area that I have a lot of information on. I'm aware of it, having read some of the statistics, and they certainly are troubling.
Do we find a lot of churches in Canada or churches in Canada, black churches, dealing with more prophetic social justice sort of issues?
Yes, there's been a long tradition historically of black church involvement in social justice issues. We look at the history of a church like Union United and the Reverend Est in the early decades of the 20th century. And Reverend Est and Union United Church were very involved in terms of social justice issues for black people in Montreal. So there's a long-standing tradition of the church being involved and aware of issues in everyday life experiences that affect black people. And that continues up until today in the 21st century.
Talk to us a little bit about, you just finished the panel here. What were you talk about today with us?
This panel this afternoon focused on black Christian experiences in Canada. Adele Halliday, who works in intercultural ministries with the United Church of Canada, was talking about the experience of black people in the United Church of Canada. She presented a video that showed some of the historical experiences as well as contemporary challenges. We also heard from Sonia Hines, who is a priest in the Anglican Church, and she's also a doctoral candidate at the University of Toronto. And she is at Trinity College, and she was discussing some of her research looking at issues of plurality within the Anglican Communion in Canada. And my own work looked at the necessity to take into consideration Caribbean Creole religions as a part of the dialogue about black Christianities in Canada.
So how important do you think this transatlantic roundtable is, this coming together of African people throughout the diaspora?
I think it's a great forum. I've had a really good time talking with people, meeting people. It's been a great opportunity to network and find out what people are doing right here in London, England. Other people who are here from France, Italy, Germany. One of the presenters this morning was here from Germany. And also what's happening in terms of the kind of research and the connections with experiences in various church communities today. So I found it very enlightening. It's a great mix of scholarly engagement, provocative discussion, as well as conversation that can be extended over tea or coffee. So I've really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed you very much. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you.